Let me thank Dawn first. Merci, Dawn, for giving us an insight in the long-term plans of Total. I invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to follow the panel discussions, a Ministerial Roundtable, a bright future through energy. May I introduce to you first the Deputy Minister for Energy of Ghana, His Excellency William Adu. The Minister of Energy and Energy Industries and Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Stuart Young. The Minister of Energy and Business Development, Ministry of Energy, Small Businesses and Entrepreneurship of Barbados, His Excellency Carrie Simmons. The moderator of this roundtable is Mr. Carlos Garibaldi, Executive Secretary of ARPEL.
Thank you.
Suriname, much like Guyana, is now attracting lots of new investments and geopolitical interest. This session highlights the importance of regional relationship in areas such as energy security, economic development, and the environment. Will increased regional cooperation and integration lead to a greater shared prosperity? And what area do policymakers aim to prioritize? Sustainability, the environment, integrated systems, legal frameworks, shared market, rule and design. Mr. Moderator, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very honored to be here. Everybody here understands the need for climate change abatement, and we're all on board with energy transitions. However, we're in a different situation in this region than in Europe, for instance, and than in the developed world. The situation in Europe is that they have a very broad middle class. They don't have a significant amount of population under the poverty level. And also, furthermore, they already developed, so they have public transportation and so forth. They seem to be more concerned with supply than with consumption and demand. And the burden is unfairly laid on the developing world, particularly those countries with the natural resources. So, as an introduction, I would like each of the honorable ministers to take about 5 minutes to discuss how do they manage the tension between the right to monetize your hydrocarbons and the pressure to combat climate change globally. In an era of energy transitions and new risk dynamics, including energy security. So we're going to start with Ghana and go this way.
Thank you very much, indeed, Mr. Moderator, and good morning to all of you. It's no gainsaying that hydrocarbons are going to play a major part in the development of the world going forward. But Ghana, as a developing country, we have decided, notwithstanding the talks of the energy transition, that we intend to exploit fully, responsibly, the hydrocarbons that we have under our feet. Unfortunately for us, unlike Trinidad and Tobago, we found oil 2007 and started production 2010. So we are relatively very young in the industry. And we have a lot of people under the poverty line to help bring up. So we demand the world to understand that our development or our transition should be done in a more equitable manner. At COP26, the President of the Republic of Ghana actually told the world exactly what I'm saying, that we intend to exploit our oil, hydrocarbons responsibly and leverage on it into the transition. As you know, transition is not cheap. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to be very expensive. And we need the resources from the hydrocarbons to help us transition in equitable, fair manner. Having said that, we do understand that transition needs to be taken into consideration. And as a result, we've set up a transition team, energy transition team in Ghana. And I personally have gone with my colleagues up and down the breadth of the country to meet with stakeholders, to take their views with a view of coming up with a plan to guide us in transitioning. We've also taken, even though we have very, very small carbon footprint as a nation, we've already started taking decisions that will ameliorate our little footprint. Some of it, just about 2 weeks ago, we planted 20 million trees around the country. And the Transport Ministry of Ghana has ordered some electrically driven mass transportation buses into the country. We've also embarked on putting solar on all government buildings. And indeed, the Presidential Palace and the Parliament are almost about two-thirds being powered by solar. And we intend to do that. In addition to that, the Electricity Company of Ghana, the utility, is just about completing a discussion with the for setting up to agree on net neutrality. The whole idea to put more on buildings, help them on the use of. So we are taking a whole lot of measures, even though, like I said, we have very little footprint, carbon footprint. But as far as our hydrocarbons are concerned, we intend to really exploit it fully. And as I speak with you, with the installed generating capacity of over 5,000 megawatts, 95% of our installed generators are on hydrocarbon, natural gas. We've moved away from the liquid fuel to natural gas, which is supposed to be the transition. As far as it's concerned, we're doing all we can, albeit we have a very little carbon footprint.
Mr. Young.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's indeed a pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you to Suriname for hosting this. I'd like to start by putting things in context, especially for us in the region. The region is the CARICOM, the Caribbean islands, or friends in CARICOM, or brothers in CARICOM, Suriname and Guyana in particular, Latin America and Africa. This is the context. We are being lectured by the developed world. The developed world want to tell us in a continuation of colonialism how we must develop our hydrocarbon resources. Allow me to just read something to you from the Journal of Petroleum Technology, dated January of this year. And listen carefully. France turns to coal as nuclear plant shutdowns threaten power grid. France expects to exceed self-imposed limits on coal usage to avoid power outages. This comes as nuclear power plants undergo maintenance and there are not enough renewable energy systems to fill the gap. As important as going green may be for the environment, France now seems to have no choice but to turn back to coal-fired electricity as a quick fix to avoid possible power outages in January and February. With 17 of the country's 56 nuclear plants temporarily shut down for planned or emergency maintenance, the French Ministry of Ecological Transition wants to raise limitations imposed in 2019 on the number of hours its three remaining coal-fired power plants are allowed to operate. And the article goes on. So the developed world, when they face an energy crisis, rush to coal. The worst hydrocarbon fuel is coal. But they want to come down now and put pressure on the developing nations who have hydrocarbon resources and tell us about decarbonization, about sustainability, and about what we must do as we try to develop and get ourselves out of it. Anyone who attended COP26 last year would have seen, ironically, on the way to Glasgow, all of the wind turbines at a standstill. Renewable energy wasn't giving them sufficient power supply in Europe. Immediately, they were restarting coal plants that were about to be decommissioned. The conversation changed with the crisis in Russia and Ukraine. Energy crisis in Europe. Again, they are now restarting, as I've just used one simple article with one country to point out to you how they react to that. Coal is the single worst polluter that is causing what we're facing here. I tell my other CARICOM brothers and sisters, Suriname, Guyana, you've been fortunate. Barbados, potential. Grenada, potential. Lots of potential in Africa. We have been fortunate enough to find hydrocarbon resources. We must come together. The message yesterday from the president of Guyana is the same message. Now is the time for us to band together with our resources and to do what we need to do in a very measured and responsible way in the development of hydrocarbon resources. Because I guarantee you, if these developed countries had the hydrocarbon resources, it would be a very different conversation. So the message is, we will work together. Trinidad and Tobago is committed to working with the CARICOM region in particular, Guyana, Suriname, the other provinces that have hydrocarbon resources, as well as Africa and Latin America, to provide energy security in a safe, cleaner manner. Because the technology that exists today will allow us to develop our hydrocarbon resources in a cleaner manner. And my caution to my friends who are now getting into this journey, be very careful about the carpetbaggers that come rushing to you with all of the solutions in the world, all of the messages in the world about how to do transition. Fix your home first. Do what you have to do first before you come to lecture us. We will listen, but do not underestimate the power that we have and that we will develop together. And that is how I want to start this morning's conversation. Because we are not sitting quietly and worse yet stupidly. We are looking on. We have the intellect. We have the ability. But our strength will come when we band together as one and sing from the same hymn sheet. And that's the message here today. Let us in the CARICOM region look after the energy security not only of the CARICOM, but also of Latin America. And we welcome our brothers and sisters from the African continent as well, who have significant resources. And very often, as their resources are exploited and used for the developed countries, they are being left behind. Because that is the conversation I've been having in the last 9 months as I traverse the globe. And I'll end on this part. Trinidad and Tobago has immediate capacity in both LNG, ammonia, urea, UAN, which go into the creation of fertilizer. Right now, the developed world and the rest of the world in this region need gas, they need fertilizer. There is one single decision, again, being taken by a developed country in the form of sanctions that prevents us from fulfilling the equation that we are unique in the world. Proven reserves right next to existing capacity to produce LNG and fertilizers. It is time we in the region have our voices heard, and that is the message that must come out of this conference. Respectfully, and as we go forward, let us work together to develop. Hydrocarbons are here to stay, in particular gas is the transition fuel going forward. The balance going forward will be a balance between renewables and gas. Brothers and sisters in Suriname and Guyana, Barbados as you get into it, we must protect our natural gas resources going forward to develop the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Young, that was crystal clear.
I hope I'm still allowed to travel after this.
And now we'll hear Mr. Simmons.
Thank you very much. It is obviously a little bit difficult to address this issue after having listened to the doctrine according to Minister Young. But I want to begin by agreeing with him substantially. Barbados, colleagues, is as frontier can be. But as we begin this journey, we confronted the issue of detentions. We started by having a policy framework which was laid in the floor of Parliament, debated on the floor of Parliament, and then was the subject of a very vigorously contested election campaign in which we won every seat that was contested. So I don't think that there's any difficulty in projecting from here to the rest of the world that Barbados's position is that we see a happy coexistence between renewables and the continued use of carefully managed hydrocarbon resources. Philosophically, there is an issue, obviously. We cannot ever shy away, and I think President Ali said it quite well yesterday. There is no question about our commitment to the issue of climate change. If there's a doubt about the impact of climate, one only had to look at the BBC News yesterday. 700,000 people in the Horn of Africa are now climate refugees coming out of Somalia. 2 million people facing malnutrition. I don't have to go that far. Right in Barbados, there are 7 parishes which are severely affected by drought. That small island of 166 square miles now has to spend millions of dollars in desalination projects to get water out of the sea so that the people in Barbados can have potable water. That is the reality of where we are. So there's no question. In fact, even as I speak to you, the island of Barbados is under tropical storm watch, and I believe that is also true for Trinidad and Tobago. So there's no issue about us being on the front line of this thing. But I think the question really has to be, how do you do the balance? And the balance has to be something that is administered judiciously. While we have to maintain the integrity and leading the charge against the fight on climate, we also have to be mindful of the fact that there are economies that have to be built. There's infrastructure that has to be built out. There is the human development capacity that has to be looked after. There is a lot of technological benefit to be derived from our people being able to be at the forefront of the transfer. I think Trinidad has been forerunner in that. Certainly Barbados looks forward to the human aspect of the technological transfer. We want to be able to make sure that we can pay our bills, and there's a lot of foreign exchange benefit to be derived. And part of the discussion has to be that, and again, President Ali touched on this point, if you say to us that we should arbitrarily stop, then who else out there is putting up their hand to stop first? It is a very difficult thing to confront a small nation which is highly indebted, caught in a developmental trap, and say, do not use your resources even though there's a market for them for the foreseeable next 30, 40, 50 years. You stop. You play no role. But there are others who are well experienced, well established, and in a far better position, and they are not volunteering to be the ones to put their hand up and say, we're the first to withdraw. In fact, as Stuart quite rightly points out, they're going back in time to the worst of the technologies. So I think that the tension is there, but the tension has to be confronted very squarely and realistically, and happy balances have to be found. Our position really is that we are going to go full thrust domestically towards making sure that Barbados is completely green domestically by the year 2030. We want to have a mixture of wind, solar, onshore and offshore wind, biofuels. But the reality is also that if we are successful in the ultra-deep water between ourselves and Trinidad and Tobago, then we are going to be using natural gas as that bridging fuel towards further development.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the main theme of the panel, which is about regional cooperation among the Caribbean nations, and also, you know, with the generous advice from an experienced country like Ghana, even if it comes from another continent. Trinidad, Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname form a new core of global significance. How are you, Caribbean nations, envisioning value chain, supply chain, logistic, and technology cooperation to share resources, regulatory experiences, and maybe gain economies of scale? We're going to start with Mr. Young.
Thank you very much. I think the message is clear, and if it's not clear, let me repeat it. The core of Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname will be collaborating going forward in the exploitation of these hydrocarbon resources. The basic economic point of economies of scale is immediately available. But one of the main points I'd like to push is by us collaborating, it also gives us strength as we deal with, we converse with, and more importantly, we negotiate with the multinationals out there and the others who will take the decisions. The truth is there is finance available, there is opportunity available. And we, as we've heard both presidents yesterday, both of Guyana and of Suriname, and now the voice of Trinidad and Tobago through me, will be collaborating to make sure that we provide energy security for the region, but importantly as well for those around us. We have the opportunity. It is critical that at this stage we meet, we take decisions, we make the policy decisions, and that will be done at the CARICOM level. And that's where we've already signed the MOU, Trinidad and Tobago with Barbados. In my recent conversations with Woodside, who are the potential developers of the deepwater block that was spoken of in Barbados waters, whilst I'm pushing Woodside to develop in Trinidad's waters, we're also talking to them about Barbados. And it's critical at this stage more so than ever for energy security of the region and the Western Hemisphere that we sing from the same hymn sheet. There's a lot of opportunity there for us, and I'm sure we will get it right because there is a commitment from those three countries that are leading the charge to make sure that we encompass everything.
Mr. Simmons, what would you wish to add?
My position on that is that there is absolutely nothing vague, nebulous, or esoteric, nothing difficult to understand on this question. The whole root, the fundamental principle behind the CARICOM community has been regional cooperation. We have done this from the very inception of the Caribbean community's collaboration together as several sovereign states coming together, and that is how we have operated in almost every sector. It is impossible, for example, to find a police officer in the Eastern Caribbean who did not do some degree of study and professional training in Barbados. It is virtually impossible to find an air traffic operator who has not had a working relationship with Trinidad and Tobago's PRCO International. And equally, I suspect it is a logical corollary that in the energy sector, we have, as Stuart has said, to be collaborating, especially around the vast experience that Trinidad and Tobago has. And obviously, it is a clear signal that has been sent by the presidents of Guyana and Suriname that they intend to deepen that collaborative effort with Trinidad, and Barbados's position is much the same. So I think that, you know, that should be as straightforward an issue as there can be.
The next question is for our two experienced oil countries here. Before reserves are discovered, contracts are usually designed to incentivize exploration via very generous terms. Once a commercially successful play is established and demand for new acreage increases dramatically, is it time or is it a good idea for a contractual and fiscal framework for new licenses that focuses on larger government take? I'm going to start with Ghana.
Yes, thank you very much, Carlos. I cast my eye back to 2004, when the petroleum agreement with Cosmos, which I believe you've had something to do with, the fiscal terms given to them were obviously very attractive. The royalty was 5%. The participating carried interest was about 10%, and additional oil entitlement based on the internal rate of return was very high. They hit oil first in 2007, and of course started production 2010. Going forward, of course, after the discovery, there was a rush of IOCs into the country for petroleum agreements, and naturally, we upped the game a little bit to our advantage. The carried interest was pushed up to 15%, and the royalty up over 10%, and the IRR was brought way down. So naturally, as soon as oil is found, the fiscal terms changes. And now I like to think Ghana is it's no more a greenfield, really. A lot of oil companies queuing up in Ghana. Unfortunately, ExxonMobil, which we were very pleased to have in Ghana, unfortunately, because of this energy transition, decided to pull out. I dare say they are threatening to come back, I'm sure, based on the exigencies of the time. But yes, indeed, once oil was discovered, the terms naturally went up. And now we call the shots. We have a lot of local content, the regulations that now determine the local content, which, of course, we've upped it. So I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Yes, Mr. Yan.
Thank you. It's a balance, all right? Because the truth and the reality is the global multinationals are under pressure. They're under pressure from the shareholders. They're under pressure from society to pull back. So again, in my respectful view, it comes back to collaboration. Because if we in the region and with our brothers and sisters in Africa, collaborators have been trying to push for the last 9 months, and we collectively put our heads together, we can change the balance. Because we don't want to run the people who are going to exploit these resources on our behalves. That's not the message. We want to get a fair share. I've spent the last 7 years in Trinidad and Tobago renegotiating the terms, for example, of a lot of these arrangements. Our 4 LNG trains are currently continuing in a renegotiation with BP and Shell as we reposition for the future. The collaboration point, especially we're holding out to Guyana, Suriname, Barbados, as you get to that stage and others, is if we sit together and we work out these are the parameters of what we're willing to accept, they have nowhere to go. Because one of the things they like to do is play you off against each other. Well, you have to understand that the boardroom in London and here and there, decisions are being made because it is a battle for the capex, the global capex. It is a reality. But how do we reposition ourselves in that conversation to get a fair extract for the exploitation of our personal resources? And that's what it comes down to. So I'm happy to say in Trinidad, we have managed to do that over the last 7 years. The proof is in the pudding, and it comes down to thinking outside of the box, just to give you a quick understanding. A renegotiating of something as similar as a basket formula price for the product. So whereas they before want to tie it to an indice, gas, Henry Hub, we managed to negotiate a basket price of JKM, NBP. JKM is Far East indice. NBP is European out of the UK. And then a percentage of just a couple dollars short of Brent, which is liquids. And that formula has worked well, especially in the current climate. These are the things we're more than willing to share, to sit with those who are now getting into it, the Suriname, the Guyana, the Barbados, the Grenada, our brothers and sisters in Africa. And let us share the learnings. I end by saying it's a balance, and there's no enemy in this thing. It is just us extracting what we believe is fair for our respective people who we answer to. Because at the end of the day, it's their resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, going to Barbados, Mr. Simmons, you are in square one. So what is Barbados going to do to incentivize oil and gas exploration?
Well, I don't think that we have too much of a challenge to incentivize it because of the fact that geographically where we are located, it automatically attracts a lot of attention. We have only had to mouth the fact that Woodside now, previously BHP, had 2 blocks offshore, and that the prospectivity has been quite impressive. I think with regard to natural gas, they're looking at, and obviously this is not yet proven, but preliminary estimates go into 16 trillion or so of cubic feet of gas. And everyone then starts to prick their ear, and the attention is there. Of course, our close proximity to Trinidad and Tobago with very vast proven resources, close proximity to Guyana makes it easy as well. I think what we have to be prepared to do is to make sure that we have the right regulatory framework, which not only allows for there to be certainty with respect to returns on investment and prudent management and so on, but at the same time deals with some of the issues which you raised in the first question, which is the tensions that can exist. And I think that as a frontier state, if you will, what we wish to do is to make sure that we can satisfy not only our local people, but the rest of the world, that if you're going to do oil and gas offshore Barbados, that you're going to be doing it in accordance with the best standards, industrial practices. Ideally, we would want to see it being an exercise where we can use modern technology, whether that is automated, artificial intelligence, et cetera, but to make sure that we do everything to safeguard and future-proof the environmental fallout which can take place.
Yeah, as a follow-up question to you, sir. If successful, or when successful, will you adopt the Norwegian model? The Norwegian model is being an hydrocarbon exporter while being green domestically.
Yeah, and that is largely where we wish to go. As I said, our national energy policy, again, laid on the floor of Parliament, debated fully, and then contested vigorously in election. And the outcome, as I indicated, was unanimous. The intention is we become green domestically by the year 2030, so that carbon neutrality for us is an imperative. Again, part of our thinking is that the gas that we extract, to the extent that it would have to be used as a bridging fuel in Barbados, would be used for a particular period of time. Obviously, there continues to be a market out there for us to be able to sell to, and there's a large demand for it. And in the event that we're successful, we intend to earn ourselves some foreign exchange, to pay some bills, to reinvest in the country's economy and infrastructure, our human resource development capacity, by way of the sale of the gas. I remember well during the last election campaign, the issue of a sovereign wealth fund was tossed out there, and a traditional Barbadian question. I never hear anything about that. What was that, boy? Never. What was sovereign wealth? What does that mean? And you have to explain to people and help them to get on board and understand that it is about having funds set aside to future-proof your country's economy. So that in the event that we are successful, there are not just wild expenditures or politically motivated expenditures, but that logical, common sense investment can be made. And one clear example of that is the fact that, again, a small island, as I indicated to you, currently under tropical storm watch, can find, if we are not lucky, that the entire coastline becomes inoperable and impassable, and that commerce has to cease for a period of a few weeks because telephone poles have fallen, wires are on the ground, and that means a restart. And commerce is affected as a result of that. Productivity suffers as a result of that. We have to take millions of dollars to now place all that infrastructure underground, again, to future-proof the economy. And part of the cost of that should be paid for out of prudently managed wealth funds that allow for us to reinvest in making it a better place.
The next question is about national companies. Suriname has had one for decades, even before this boom. Guyana doesn't have one. So I asked the panel, is it a good or bad idea to establish a national company for PSCs or for joint venture partnering, if there wasn't one? And should acreage promotion be done via the NOC or via an agency? And we'll start with Ghana.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ghana has had a national oil company or corporation for many, many years, way before 1984. And the first act is the EMP Act of 1984. It is always good to have a skin in the game. And to have a national oil company building up this capacity and taking interest in the interests of the host country is always a good idea. Ghana, as a result of this, even before the energy transition reared its head, the national oil company made a decision to set up an offshoot, to develop it, build the capacity to become an operator, an independent operator. And now that the transition is here, I mentioned ExxonMobil pulling out. We don't know who else is going to pull out the IOC. So we want to be in the position where we will be able to stand on our own feet with our own operator, an offshoot called an Explocor, that is formed by the National Oil Company. So it's something that we're very proud of. And gradually, we're building this capacity, like I said, to get to the point where, as a country, we will be able to develop or have our own operator for the hydrocarbons that we intend to exploit, as mentioned earlier. So that's my take.
Mr. Young.
Trinidad and Tobago has been exploiting oil for over 100 years, gas for the past few decades. So we have a national oil company. I was scanning the room to see if I saw them here because they know the constant lecture from me many times a week. Our national oil company came about as the purchase, a nationalization, as the big oil and the oil producers got out in the mid-80s. So exactly what has happened, because they come in to exploit your resources. So as there was a downturn, there was a refinery in Trinidad and Tobago. They came out, the government of the day decided to purchase it. The refinery right now has been closed as we've restructured it. But we have an oil company that a big part of it is exploration and production. They're not getting it done as quickly as I would like in the current circumstances, but they have great plans. Okay, I'm now spotting them there at the back of the room as they smile at me. So the oil part works, and it has been very successful after we've restructured what existed before. The gas, we have National Gas Company. National Gas Company has offshoots. It has been extremely successful for Trinidad and Tobago. When we came in as an administration in 2015, there was a huge push and pressure on us at the governmental level to restrict National Gas Company and to limit it to a pure transporter, because right now they're aggregator of domestic gas. We resisted it. We fought it. I was getting slaughtered in the newspapers by entities that were pushing a certain narrative, but we stood strong, and I'll give you this just to close it off, why you must do so. Ammonia producers, we are one of the largest ammonia producers in the world. At the time, their product was attracting $180 US a metric ton. So they're bringing huge pressure on us that, oh, you have to reduce the margin, etc. We stood strong because it's cyclical. Up to a few weeks ago, ammonia is now fetching $1,400 US a metric ton. 180, 1,400. I have nobody screaming at me anymore on that conversation. This week, we want more gas. That is what they're now pushing out there, and that's what we're working on. So just again, be aware of these things. There are always agendas, and nothing is wrong with that. But I've always seen it as a government's position, certainly my time there, which is only for a time, is to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago and their resource. If you had caved in as a government and given them the price they were screaming for, we wouldn't be getting any returns today. I remember the conversation with the Prime Minister at Easter when they were threatening to close down plants. And we said, hey, let's just hold strong. At the end of the day, we believe in Trinidad and Tobago and what we have to offer. And today, those same people are fetching over $1,400 US a metric ton for their product. And they have the choice globally as to where they place that product. And when you look at the outlook because of the Russia-Ukraine war, it's not going to stop anytime soon. So I'm a big advocate for countries having their oil and gas state companies to manage the resources and to fight for your people. Because if you're not fighting for your people, believe you me, nobody else ain't going to do it.
And Mr. Simmons, what are your plans if you're successful when you're planning to have a national company?
Well, we have been extracting natural gas in Barbados since the 1970s. What we have domestically, that's onshore the island, has been quite considerable amount of natural gas. Where we have failed to do our development has been offshore. So that we already have a national oil company. And the intention is to strengthen that national oil company. It obviously now has to learn a lot about the offshore space. And again, this is where the kind of collaboration that I talked about with Trinidad and with Guyana will come about. And this is entirely in keeping. That kind of cross-fertilization of experiences is entirely in keeping with what the CARICOM community vision was intended to be in the first instance. I think that the key issue for us is to continue to make sure that our national oil company is able to be run along the most prudent of lines. We want to make sure that there's appropriate levels of oversight, that there's an adequate standard of reporting. Those are the things that I suspect really can put national oil companies in trouble from time to time. And there has to be a clearly defined vision, which we are now working out, again, being Frontier, as to what its role will be. Is it just going to be helping us with the upstream work, or is it going to be also the value-added things which then are more downstream related? Or is that a matter that should be a combination of private sector enterprise and the national oil company playing a role. What I'm particularly attracted to is the point that Stuart makes with respect to ensuring that you can safeguard against just the predatory nature of a multinational coming in, doing its extraction, not necessarily paying close attention or careful attention to the standards environmentally and so on, not paying close attention to the transfer of technology, not paying close attention to the development of the human resource capacity. These are the areas in which small states have often been badly bruised because of the fact that we don't have the capacity. We kind of get a little bit starry-eyed about the success without putting in place these safeguards that allow for prudential management as you go forward. And so whatever the end result is, our national oil company has to be one that can be a partner with the government in making sure that we adequately protect the future interests of the country.
Yeah, a related question, thinking your point for the three countries is how do you ensure technology transfer, national content, and education of a local workforce to gradually replace imported supplies, services, and expats?
Well, I've been having this discussion with my Director of Natural Resources, who is sitting here somewhere, and we've been able to identify a few things that we really want to do. The first one really is to be able to do an audit, if you will, of what the skill sets required would be to I suppose, support and work with a productive oil and gas sector, similar to what Trinidad and Tobago has. If we were fortunate enough to get anywhere close to where Trinidad is, what we would then want to do is to be able to understand clearly what are the derivative industries and services and so on that come about. In fact, part of the exhibition experience yesterday was a little bit of an eye-opener for me because I saw some things that I did not even recognize could be, part of the spin-off. Above and beyond that, it is necessary, I think, to source some of the technical cooperation that is out there so that we can then liaise with those people in Barbados to help them to understand what the opportunities are, because getting a grasp and a feel for it at government level helps us to set policy and so on. But there must be, at a business-to-business level, an appreciation of what those range of new opportunities are and how they fit into the development trajectory. Beyond that, I think it is necessary then to do the actual training of your human resources. And probably, I am the Minister of Business Development. I can tell you that a lot of that which we have done in the international financial services sector, the tourism sector, has been providing people with the necessary consultancy opportunities so that hand-holding is done to lift them from the stage where they are and carry them to the stage where they can be competitive internationally. And obviously that for a virgin sector like oil and gas in Barbados would be a critical thing that we would have to do. So that the building out of the local content, I think, has to be determined politically and led by government policy. And for us, it is a big deal. That is really where we would want to be.
Mr. Edu.
Thank you very much, Carlos. In the case of Ghana, we believe that most of these international companies will not on their own accord really train your people to take over the positions that they have within their institutions. So we have enacted actual laws to actually push them to give us a percentage of their procurement from locally manufactured materials, personnel, financing, and such like. A case in point, we found out, incidentally, the chief executive of the petroleum authorities here, and he is a fan of local content and local participation. We realized that we didn't have enough welders, for example, undersea welders. So he initiated it. Albert, I think you have to stand up for people to see, because I'm sure there are a few people who want to talk to you afterwards. He initiated a training of trainers and signed an agreement with the University of Alberta, where we sent our people, because hitherto, these welding jobs were going to foreigners, and our guys just did not have the requisite certification to be employed in the industry. So they were sent to Alberta University, trained, and they've come back to train students from technical universities and polytechnics who are now have certification to embark on these jobs. I mentioned local content. We also have local participation in Ghana, and that is the actual ownership of part of the business upstream. And indigenous Ghanaian companies are encouraged to do. Incidentally, we defined indigenous Ghanaian company as a company that is set up in Ghana with 51% equity, 80% of top management and executives, and 100% the rest as an indigenous Ghana company. And before any petroleum agreement is successful or ratified by Parliament, 5% has to be from an indigenous Ghana company that is carried over and above the carried interest of the national oil company. So there are a whole lot of stuff that we are doing to encourage local people to be trained, not just by waiting on them, like I said, but by law. And the Petroleum Commission, which is the regulator of upstream, actually makes sure that this is done. And indeed, every year, the international company has to give a record of their plan, actually a plan that they have for local content and local participation to the Commission for its approval. And it is actually enforced to the letter to make sure that our people also get a piece of the pie. And gradually, the last 12 years since production ensued, a lot of Ghanaian companies have been empowered to play a major part in the oil and gas industry in the country.
Minister Yang?
Trinidad and Tobago is in a fairly unique position in that we have the experience and have had the experience for quite a while. So there are a number of different things as I listen to the conversation I'd like to just put on the table. One is the training of your nationals, that transferring of technology, etc. One of the ways we've managed to attempt to build that in is the PSCs, the production sharing contracts, the E&P license, exploration and production licenses. The multinationals have to put aside a certain amount of money towards scholarship and training of our nationals, and we manage it through that process. It's another opportunity for collaboration in the region, because as Sir Simmons was saying, as you would have seen yesterday, there are a lot of Trinidadian companies who have had the experience in the service industry. We also have that in the training side. So it's an invitation to the rest of CARICOM, to Africa. We've done it with Mozambique, some in Ghana as well. You can come to Trinidad where we've set up the institutions to train and to get the young people knowledgeable about this. The service companies, we have a huge service company industry where they have the experience. We push for the transfer. That's one of the areas where the multinationals have been very good in terms of placing. I always have a sense of pride no matter where I've gone in this portfolio, and even before, globally in the energy sector, they're always Trinidadians in leadership roles because of how long we've been in the industry. They saw it as an opportunity to do their training, etc., and they've moved up in the ranks and this type of thing. So I think it's another area for collaboration where we can more than assist with both the benefits of what we've learned via training, transfer of technology, etc., but you can build it in not only legislatively, but also in your negotiation of contracts.
I believe we have 10 minutes for...
Carlos, I must say that a lot of the laws that's backing E&P law in Ghana, we consulted. We came over to Trinidad and Tobago and Norway and other countries to pick best practices and put them together. So we're very grateful to Trinidad and Tobago. We still have cooperation going on, and also Guyana. We started also cooperating with Guyana. So it's not just regional cooperation. We have intercontinental cooperation as well between Ghana
That's why you're here.
Of course.
And, well, one last question, and we have like 10 minutes, so I believe. Let's talk about one aspect of the natural resource curse, which is how can countries avoid becoming an oil and gas monoculture, and by how they keep their economies diversified, their legacy industries vibrant, and their agricultures continuing to produce the mainstay staples to feed their growing populations. And we're going to start with Mr. Simmons.
Thank you. Let me begin again with the, in many ways it all begins with the plan, at least for us it did. We set out the national energy policy. It clearly defines that we want to have a mix of energy in Barbados for the purposes of our energy independence and obviously the security. So that renewable energy is going to be the main focus of our effort. Whether we are successful or whether we are not, we want to continue to invest heavily in the RE technology. And we have specific targets in terms of dates and volumes of megawatts that we want to have on our grid within specific times and so on, and where it will be sourced, even locations generally offshore and onshore. That's with regard to wind. It is therefore very easy for us at a policy level to reflect on the fact that if we are successful and we do get an influx of foreign exchange, that we can target that foreign exchange for developmental purposes. And as I said, we start from the beginning understanding that it is an imperative for us to have a wealth fund that allows us to better manage by way of investing prudently and then bringing those funds on island for things like infrastructural development and so on. If there is one thing we learned from the pandemic period, is that if we don't start to take ourselves seriously and to collaborate closely in this region, nobody else is going to take us seriously. And so therefore, we've watched what happened with history. We understand the Dutch disease thing. We understand the so-called curse of finding new commodities. But the commodities market, whatever it is, oil, gas, whatever, it's going to have its peaks and it's going to have its troughs. Prices, and Stuart just outlined it well. You're going to have a certain period of despair where everyone is going to say, oh, forget about that. And then 10 years from now, is a boom cycle. So that the requirement for prudent management, I think, is fundamental to us in the process. We have made our business off of two major efforts industrially. Tourism, to the extent that you can call it the tourist industry, but that is really where Barbados has made its name, and international financial services. They continue to be at the forefront of our economic endeavor. So that what oil and gas poses for us is an opportunity for value added. And it must be, or we see it as being managed in a way that is just value added, not that it becomes the alternative to, or that it replaces in any way those areas of development. And frankly speaking, we also see it as a means of developing a very critical part of this whole process, which is our human resource capacity. If we are successful, it obviously means that you are at an industrial level giving the country a first-hand opportunity to participate in areas of economic endeavor and activity professionally, and maybe not even so professionally, but in related ways that never existed before. That means that we can train our people into new spheres, new areas of activity. And as Stuart indicated, you come to a point where you have skilled Barbadians who are then able to find jobs in similar sectors all the way around the world. And quite frankly, many of those jobs which are now critical to the oil and gas sector become transferable into the renewable energy business. And I've come to understand that especially at the professional level, there are some areas where we have tended to excel. Again, international financial services is one of them. We have a lot of accountants on the island, but I don't think we have any accountants on the island who are skilled in the kind of audits that need to be done in the energy sector. So it opens new vistas of opportunity.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes each to Mr. Edu.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Carlos. You know, politicians, we are notorious for dipping our hands in monies, especially election times, to try and get people on our side. Because of that, Ghana, when we started production, we decided to enact laws to control how the revenues from petroleum will be spent. And we enacted a law called the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. And that law actually stipulates how the revenues from petroleum to be used to avoid this Dutch case or whatever you call it. We were doing fine before oil. We had our cocoa and gold and diamonds, whatever. So what the law says is we have two investment funds. It set up 4 different funds. The 2 investment funds that we call the petroleum funds. And one is the Ghana Stabilization Fund. It's invested to take care of the budget and other things when we have a dip in oil sales. So that fund is there, it's invested. The second fund is we call the Heritage Fund. That one is for, of course, the future generation. That one too is invested to protect it against inflation. And then we have the annual budgetary fund, the amount that goes into the budget per year to help a government expenditure. And the final one is some percentage for the National Oil Company to do its work. So these funds are there as a check on us, the politicians, not to misuse the monies that come in. And things like agriculture, infrastructure, rural electrification, you name it, all sorts of developmental expenditure is taken care of by the budget fund, the amount that goes to the budget per year. So we hope by so doing, we protect our legacy industries and at the same time build up these funds for the future and also for the stabilization. So we like to think that we've got it just about right as far as avoiding the Dutch case is concerned.
Thank you so much. Mr. Young, to finish.
I'm smiling because it is an issue for us in Trinidad and Tobago. My advice in particular to Suriname, Guyana, Barbados down the road and others who are getting into it, be aware of it. You're in somewhat of a fortunate position that you have not dedicated your economy to it. My view is not the end of the world. So I always tell Trinidadians, hey, you're looking at it as though it's a bad thing. That reliance is not a bad thing. It's how do you build resilience when you go through, as Mr. Simmons said, the ups and the downs. I was remembering last story, April 2020. Oil prices went into negative. I remember that day watching the crash of oil prices, being on the phone with the Minister of Finance, the then Minister of Energy, the Prime Minister, and saying, you all watching this thing? Theoretically, when it went into negative with WTI, it meant people were paying you to come and take the oil from them. You didn't have to pay for the oil. Today, go and check it. Oil is over 100, and when I tried to check it this morning, over $110, $112 a barrel because of a geopolitical crisis. It's just to have the knowledge, build your resilience, do your sovereign wealth funds, the Heritage Stabilization Fund, we have it in Trinidad, but you're in a fortunate position, Suriname. You already have your economy. I listened carefully to the language of my comrade here from Barbados. As he said, it will be an addition, it's an add-on. Trinidad and Tobago is in a different space to that, in that we do have a level of dependency on oil and gas. I'm not going to run or shirk from that. And it's not a bad thing. As you go forward, my last message is, if I'm allowed the privilege, the global energy sector is very, very volatile. decisions that are taken very far out of this region have not only ripple effects on us, have direct effects on us. The collaboration is key, but you're allowed to learn from the passage of time and the journeys of others. Do so. That's the simple point. Hydrocarbons are here to stay, in particular gas. Developed countries, get rid of it, and developing countries, get rid of the coal first before you really start to lecture us too hard. There's oil that then has to go down, but gas is, if you want to call it, a transition fuel going forward. Now is the time. You're fortunate, you're at a great place as you start off, but also be aware of how quickly it could change and how quickly the global conversation could change. So you have to be nimble with your decision making. That's one of my stresses and frustrations, that I can't get things to move as quickly as I would like. But the message is, there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of opportunity. It is how do we manage, how do we navigate it? And that's what we've all come here to have those conversations. Trinidad and Tobago is very available to the continent, to CARICOM, to Latin America, to share our experiences. But let's get the collaboration right, and I'd like to just thank you.
Well, Your Excellencies, I must thank you for this very, I think the audience shares my view. There has been a very fruitful and quite candid panel. And we thank you very much, and I think they deserve a round of applause.
Thank you so much, ministers from Barbados,
Okay, photo.
from Trinidad and Tobago, as the Deputy Minister from Ghana, His Excellency, and of course, a round of applause for our moderator, Mr. Garibaldi.
Do we have a minute, a second to take a photo?
Excuse me? Okay. We have a 12-minute break now. Please be back at 11:30, and we kindly ask you to not bring consumption into the Royal Ballroom. Thank you. See you at 11:30. Raphael, is it